Good morning or afternoon, depending on when you're accessing this. My name is Chris McDaniel. I'll be your professor this semester for Essentials of Spiritual Formation. Really looking forward to getting to know you as time runs on. This is the lecture video, I guess, for the first week, and I'll admit just here at the very beginning that this is my first time teaching a class like this, so we'll bear with one another as we walk on. I'm going to give you just a little bit of information about myself. Hopefully over the course of the first couple of weeks, you guys will be participating in the kind of introduce yourself forums, but I'll take my chance to do that here. My name is Chris, like I said. I'm the pastor at Trinity Anglican Church here on the west side of Midtown, and planted this church as a young leader. I was 26 years old when I planted in 2002, and so we've been at it for quite some time, actually. Over the course of the last 15 years or so, our church has grown to now be a church planting church. And so one of our callings and core commitments at Trinity is to be a church that not only functions, but also exists to send out other church plants. And so we are repopulating Atlanta by the grace of God, one church at a time, with churches that love Jesus and love the people here in the city. I'm married to Karen, who is in actually the spiritual direction certificate program here at Richmont. And we have 3 kids. Maddie is a freshman in college, and Scout, our daughter, is a senior at Grady High School. And then we have a son named Finn, like Huckleberry, who's a freshman at Grady. So a family with kids who are growing up and doing all the things that kids do that are growing up. So spiritual formation, the essence of this class, is really all about the essentials and foundations of formation. So we're going to be speaking into one of my very deep passions as a Christian leader. Like I said, I planted Trinity when I was 26. What I didn't tell you in that was that our church grew rapidly, especially early on. We hit a vacuum in the city. For those of you who are from Atlanta, there are a lot of churches in Atlanta, in the city, doing a lot of things. When we planted, there were not a lot of churches doing the work that we were doing. And so when we got ourselves established, we hit this vacuum, and all these people just found us. So from almost day one, guest outnumbered people who knew where the bathrooms were. So it was a chaotic time. It was really exciting in the sense that a lot of people were coming to know Jesus. A lot of people were coming to know our church, making commitments to the community. But it was also a really chaotic time. Rapid church growth is tricky. I remember hearing a mentor of mine once say that if the devil can't get in front of something and stop it, he'll get behind it and push it so that it moves at a pace that's unsustainable. Well, that was exactly what happened in our church early on. We were moving at a pace that was unsustainable. And I remember many, many years ago in the bed with my son, reading to him. By the way, I would still read to my kids if they would let me, but they don't because they're old. But I was reading to him The Lorax, one of the Dr. Seuss books. And in that book, the Lorax said, or the bad guy said to the Lorax, "I'm figuring on biggering and biggering and biggering." He was like a cautionary tale of someone who just wanted to live externally and grow things and make things big and make things work, a very American sentiment. And I remember reading that book, and it was almost as if the Lord spoke to me through a Dr. Seuss book. And I felt in my heart that it was like God was inviting me to consider this question. Chris, are you figuring on biggering? Are you going to live for externals, or are you going to cultivate the inside? And I'm going to be honest with you guys. The reality is the pressure of our world today is a pressure that causes us to want to bigger, to focus on externals and not the inside. Because, nobody knows what's going on or really cares what's going on the inside of your soul until your insides come spilling out in the form of a crisis or controversy or scandal. And it was right then and there. Tears actually filled my eyes when I was reading this Dr. Seuss book with my son. And I felt like the Lord said, "Chris, are you going to put yourself on a track where you tend to your insides?" And that was really when, for me, spiritual formation and being intentional about spiritual formation became a significant driver in my life. I remember reading Dallas Willard shortly thereafter, and Dallas Willard said, everyone, from Mother Teresa to Adolf Hitler everyone has a spiritual formation. Some people just do it right and do it intentionally, and some people don't do it intentionally, but everyone has one. So you have a spiritual formation. You are actively being formed. Jamie Smith, one of my favorite philosophers, he says, you are what you love. You don't love what you say you love. You don't love the books that you can quote from. You are on the insides, and that manifests in your external behaviors. And it does us no good to pretend, to dress it up. And I'm going to tell you that early on in my life as a pastor, I lived more externally than I should have. Most of my Bible reading was to gain an insight so that I could share it in a sermon. Most of the books that I would read were to share and pass on helpful words of wisdom to somebody else in a counseling session, to sound helpful, to be helpful. And I don't know where you are. I don't know what your goal is, why you're here, why you're in this program. Maybe you're in ministry or desire to be in ministry. But what I will tell you this, your insides are really and must really be the driver for the whole of your life. Your insides will ultimately come out. They will ultimately manifest in your lived experience. You have a spiritual formation. Maybe this is an opportunity in this course for us to take that formation and be more intentional about it. We're going to be talking about things like the kingdom of God, the invitation of the Lord. We're going to be looking at how to cultivate a rule of life, things that for me are lived, life-changing experiences. And so I'm actually really excited to walk alongside you, because I will tell you that for me, spiritual formation and being intentional about my life with God, this has saved my life. Not just my ministry, not just my marriage and my engagement with my friends and my role as a father and a husband and all of those things, but just my own soul. Probably 10 years ago, right around the time that I read that book, I was sitting and watching TV one night with my wife, and my face went numb, this side of my face. I thought I was having a stroke. And I looked at my wife and I said, I think I'm having a stroke. And she said, Chris, I think you're having some hippie kids version of a panic attack. The pressure of life, all the externals, all the figuring of biggering, all the things that I was managing outside, trying to be a good leader, trying to hold it together, trying to have something helpful to say. It all came to a head. I was having physical symptoms of stress and anxiety in my body. And it was then that I felt this invitation of the Lord to turn inward and to go deeper. So I joined the Renovari program. I was privileged to sit with Dallas Willard for 2 years before he died. Actually, we were the last cohort in the Renovari program to be with Dallas in lecture sessions and retreat environments before he went to be with the Lord. I'll always be grateful for that. It was during that season that I first encountered books like The Great Omission and The Divine Conspiracy. Shortly after that, I was able to meet and really interact with John Ortberg. And so the 3 books that we're going to read in this program are going to be Divine Conspiracy, Great Omission, and then The Me I Want to Be. I chose The Me I Want to Be because I'm just going to warn you, if you haven't read The Divine Conspiracy, that book will kick your rear end. It's not an easy book to read. It's a really important book to read. So I've chosen Ortberg because he's going to help us exhale a little bit. So when we get to him, you'll be able to plow right through that book. It'll be easier, not less meaningful, just an easier read for us. So I'm going to ask you over the next number of weeks to put your thinking cap on. I'm going to ask you to admit the places in your life where you may talk a good game, but maybe the inside of your soul is not really where you want it to be. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to know that before anybody else does. If we'll learn to pay attention to our lives, to what's going on in our hearts, then we can actually make changes before crisis comes knocking at our door. And one of the things that we hope for you is that we're going to learn to do life with God, that we're going to learn to have a demonstrable, repeatable way of being with God. If you ask my friends, my family members, how is Chris with God? They're going to tell you the aspects of my rule of life. My rule of life is not terribly complicated, but it works for me. And one of the things that I'm going to work for you is to be able to articulate a way of being with God. We want you here at Richmont, and I want you as a pastor in this city to have a life with God. I want what's under the surface of your life to be more substantial than what's visible. If you think of your life as an iceberg, I want the depth of that substance to be more significant than the tip that people see. And the truth is, for most of us in the evangelical world, we have not been taught this. We've been taught to look right, act right, say the right things, think the right way, read the right books, go to the right church. But we haven't been taught to live a life that's hidden with God in Christ. So one of the things that we're going to call you to in this course is to cultivate godly secrecy. And I want you to think about that for a few minutes. We have a lot of secrecy in our world, and people live their lives terrified that their secrets are going to be found out. What we don't explore enough, and Christians throughout the centuries have done a great job of this, we just don't, is having a life that's hidden with God. There are things that I do with the Lord in my private spiritual formation that I don't tell anybody about. Things that insights that never make their way into a sermon. Things the Lord shares with me to comfort and meet my heart that I treasure. And I think as we sit here right at the very beginning of Advent, I'm an Anglican pastor, and so we're leading up to Christmas and focusing on the coming of Jesus. You know, Mary features so heavily in that story, doesn't she? And one of the things I love about Mary is that she treasured things in her heart. One of the gifts of spiritual formation is you and me learning to treasure things in our hearts, to not live primarily externally, but to be a person of substance. I'm going to leave you with this, and then we'll be doing little videos like this probably every week or so. In one of my favorite C.S. Lewis books, The Great Divorce, story's an amazing story, and it's about moving further into God's country. And the picture that Lewis paints in that story is that the further in you go, the more substantial you become. That when we start off in our journey, we're like shades, shadows, ghosts, really. And the problem with being a ghost in God's country is that God's country is really real. And when you're not really substantial, even the blades of grass in God's country, they hurt your feet. And you've probably experienced this at some point in your life with God. You maybe have felt like you lacked depth or substance, and you came across a person who is deeply substantial. And it felt like their reality was so much more real than yours. I know I felt that when I met Dallas for the first time. I remember thinking, I don't want to say too much in front of this guy. This guy's the real deal, and I feel increasingly shadow-like in front of him. I felt that when I spent time in spiritual direction with Jan Johnson and other people, men and women of depth and substance, people who've got a weight of glory to them. The thing about that story that Lewis tells is that some people in their shadowy state just decide to get back on the bus. They decide to go back to the shadowy place where everybody and everything was shadowy. And I think we live in a cultural moment right now where there's a lot of place to go with a lack of depth. There's a lot of spots to hang out, even churches that we could hang out in, or graduate programs where we could spend time where we're not confronted with real and with hard, with deep. We're not confronted with things that make us feel like ghosts. But the thing that Lewis says that I love is he says, if you will just walk on the blades of grass and let them hurt your feet, if you will just not get back on the bus, not retreat to shallow places, if you'll keep moving onward and upward, you will become incrementally a person of deeper and greater substance. My hope for you is the same hope that I have for myself. It's that I would be able to bend the blades of grass in God's country. I want to be a man of such substance. I want you to be a woman of such substance that you are able, with your feet, to bend the blades of grass in God's country. And I'm going to tell you, our world, it's not looking for wise, clever people. Sometimes it may look like it. Our world's not looking for people who can send the perfect tweet, or have the perfect pithy saying, or the perfect clever story to put at the beginning of a sermon, or a counseling session, or a spiritual direction session. Our world is looking for men and women of depth and substance, and the only way that you and me, that we will become people of substance, is if we tend to that which is inside of us. The only way that you will become the kind of woman who doesn't blow back and forth in the midst of crisis and adversity is if you will tend to your insides. And y'all, the call of God on every one of us is to tend to our insides, is to look to the stuff and the places that nobody sees, to tend to the important places inside of us that are not going to get us lots of attention and accolade. They maybe won't even get us promoted or hired, but they're going to make us into the kind of men and women that we're supposed to be. God's got a purpose for you, and I believe that you're here to grow. So what that means is that over the next 15 weeks or so, I want you to make a commitment before God. I'm not going to micromanage you. I've got too much to do. I want you to make a commitment before God that you're going to read. That you're not going to cut corners. That even when Dallas is challenging, even when stuff that Willard says is confusing or hard to wrap your head around, that you're going to press in, that you're going to push toward trying to understand. We're also going to have opportunities on the online forums to interact over something that's being stirred in the reading or something that maybe I say in some of these videos. And I want you to give it your all. I want you to go deep in an area. I'm not going to ask you to do summaries of everything you read for your online forum posts. What I'm going to ask you to do is to grab onto something of meaning and substance and reflect deeply on it. See, the truth of the matter is you can get through a class without having your life changed. Or you can make decisions to linger in the places where you sense God's moving and to really mine out truth there. You're not going to remember everything that Dallas wrote in these two books. You're not going to remember everything that Ortberg wrote. But what you may be able to do is to pull out some truth that you can carry with you and the insights that you can keep and use and live into for the rest of your life. And if you can do that, if you pull 5 or 6 insights out of some of these books and some of our conversations that you can carry with you, then you're going to be okay. And we're all going to be okay. So I don't want you to be intimidated. We're going to read. We're going to plow through. I want you to give yourself time to read. Don't wait till the last second, because I'll know in your writings that you haven't really processed the information. I want you to give this thing time to meditate, and give yourself time to meditate, yourself time to marinate maybe in the truth that you're reading. We're also going to log on. We're going to be together every couple of weeks in a Monday night session. And I'm not going to lecture there. I'm going to do some video talks to you, and I'll share some things that I've been thinking about. But I'm going to give you space. I think there are about 9 of us in this class, so it's not a bunch of us, to interact over it for an hour. And it won't be rocket science. It'll just be hopefully meaningful. My heart for you is to get into your heart. I want you to make the most of this. And then we're going to have one assignment. It's going to be a big paper, 14-page paper. Don't be intimidated by that. We'll get there when we get there. It's going to be fine. Again, we're looking for a lived experience of God. We're not looking for you to prove to me how smart you are. I want you to follow the path where it leads you and know the Lord's going to be good. It's going to be a good time together. So my email address is on the syllabus. You can reach out to me. I'll do my best to get in touch with you within a timely manner. But like I said, this isn't your primary job. It's also not my primary job. We're all doing this probably around the edges of a full life. But you know what? We can do it together and make the most of it. And I think we'll have a good time. God bless you. Bye.